Welcome everyone to our CSA Ideas Lab. We're talking today about sliding scales, really around novel payment models and methods to support CSA access and success. I'm Frances Keller. I'm your facilitator for this afternoon. I am a food blogger and recipe developer based in Pomona, California. And so my blog is called Cooking with Our CSA, where it's all about seasonal recipes using our CSA box. Community-supported agriculture is a cause near and dear to my heart when we think about supporting our local and regional food systems in the area. And based here in Southern California, we are a little spoiled where we have a CSA that's pretty much year-round. But today we're going to be talking about sliding scale payment models that are applied to CSA shares and the ways that this supports advancing food access, along with talking about best practices for adopting this on CSA farms. So I'm excited that you're here today. We've got a great lineup of speakers with us, and let's get going. The other thing I think to note, so I'm connected with CSA Innovation Network here through our Equity and Access Learning community. It's a fantastic community of both farmers and all of those connected to the food space, where we're really looking at how we promote equity and accessibility within the CSA space and within our local and regional food systems as well. So kind of a shameless plug for that. If it's something that's interesting to you and that you would like to learn more about, feel free to reach out to Sadie or Liv here after our session. All right, for today, the lineup here, talking a little bit about CSA Innovation Network. And then we have three amazing farmers here and panelists to share a little bit about their model structures for sliding scale payments within the CSA space. So we have Jared Lukens Black from Budding Moon Farm, Abigail Miller from Wonka's Harvest, and Brian Allen from Zephyr Organics. We'll then wrap up with facilitated discussion and Q&A and close out our time together today. So a little bit about the CSA Innovation Network and its purpose for those if you're familiar with it or if this is new to you. And so the network here works to connect farmers, provide technical assistance, and to support technical assistance to consumers to increase the viability of community-supported agriculture. This network provides educational programs, tools, resources, idea sharing, and engagement that advances the purpose and premise of creating stronger, more equitable CSA programs. And so we do this through both awareness and really sharing both meaning and value within CSAs. The way this works, we have two prominent learning communities where we have levels of engagement, and you probably hear my daughter coming home from school. I apologize for that in advance. We have our equity and access community and regional organizing as two of the learning communities that we have here. Okay, hold on. I might need to go on mute for just a second.
I can also probably hop in and just move us forward. I'm not sure, Frances, if you can continue advancing the slides, but you probably just saw in the chat that Sadie, the network coordinator for the CSA Innovation Network, just shared some links to some Google Forms if folks are interested in joining either of these learning communities focused on equity and access and regional organizing. These are monthly groups for peer-to-peer learning with topics kind of self-directed by participants. So this is where the idea for today's discussion originated, was in the equity and access learning community. So if you're interested in chatting with farmers and other farmer support organization folks, these are awesome spaces. Frances, if you're there, can you advance the slide, or are you ready?
Yes, I can. Thank you for your patience and grace. Okay, so to kick us off here, as we begin our panel discussion, we'll introduce Jared Lukens Black from Budding Moon Farm to share a little bit about all the things that they're doing to create a sliding scale payment option that's working for their CSA members.
Thanks, Francis. Sorry, I was just getting my name changed from Anna to Jared. So it is Jared here from Budding Moon Farm in Spearfish, South Dakota. You could go to the next slide, Francis. A little about the farm. So I'm on a really small farm. I operate it just by myself. My wife, Anna, works off farm in town. I always like to make sure to disclose that because I know that that puts me in a different situation than a lot of farmers who maybe rely solely on their farm income. So if disaster strikes the farm, we can always lean back on Anna's income and get health insurance through that. So that puts me in a very different situation. And I think that's important to note, especially with sliding scale or trying out different payment options, is that I have a little bit of leeway to take some risks to try different things that if they don't necessarily turn out, it's not going to make or break on cause us to have to sell the farm. So we're just outside of Spearfish, South Dakota. It's a town of, I think, a little bit less than 15,000, maybe 12,000. And most of the members for my CSA come from our town or county and one county adjacent to us as well that's similar in size. So there's maybe an area with 40,000 people within 50 minutes, and that's kind of the area. 100% of my distribution of vegetables goes out through CSAs, which includes prescription produce or Veggie RX program that I operate as well. Yeah, that's about it. Next slide. A little bit about my CSA and the sliding scale, or what I call it, pay what's right for you model. I use that name or terminology just to hopefully make it make sense to people who aren't necessarily familiar with the idea of a sliding scale. In our area, a lot of people aren't even familiar with a CSA. It's not very common. There's a couple other CSA farms in the area, but definitely not a wide reach like in other areas where I've lived, such as Portland or the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Let's see. So I've tried a few different models over the last few years, and this is on the right side of the screen. That's the suggested prices or payments for members this year. And you might notice there's not a slide up option necessarily. It just has a slide down. And in previous years, as you can kind of see at the bottom, in the previous year, I had the option to slide up to 200% or just double the value of the CSA share. And the year before that, I had a scale that went up to 300% of the value. And I haven't seen a whole lot of difference between trying it each year. Got some of the details on the next slide, which I'll go over in a second. So members can kind of just self-select where they want to pay in at, figuring out from their household income. And then I also make to note that, you know, not everybody who has the same income is at the same spot, so that people feel free to really, really pay what's right for them, for their budget, for their family. My main goal is to make sure that quality food is available and accessible and affordable to all people. It's in our area, as in most areas, it's accessible to higher middle income people more so. And so I've really tried to make a concerted effort to make sure that I'm reaching out to and making sure my numbers reflect that I'm reaching out to people who are on the lower end of the income scale. And that includes my prescription produce program, which is I collaborate with a few providers at the hospital, and they refer patients who are on Medicaid or Medicare with disability to me, and they are able to pay on the lowest end of the spectrum. So which ends up being about 20% of the value of the CSA box. Let's see. Yeah, you could go to the next slide. That kind of breaks down how I came upon my scale. So there's a bunch of numbers here, which I'll just try to highlight quickly. When I first started with the idea of a sliding scale, jumped into my mind not from farms. I was exposed to it more through healthcare and sliding scale payments in the healthcare, since Anna's works at the hospital, and then discovered that other farms were doing it as well. I know Brian, who will speak later, from working under him at Zenger Farm, and they had introduced a sliding scale. So I asked him a lot of questions when I first started. But one of my biggest things was trying to figure out where would the sliding scale base be in our community, because it's all very contextual. Just what a sliding scale looks like in different city, different town. And so looked around trying to figure out, what's median income. There's a number of places such as the MIT living wage. And I think Brian's going to reference another one to kind of let you know what is a living wage that where people are able to afford and not struggle with cost of housing, et cetera, in your area. So I used some of those numbers, and then also broke down kind of how many servings of veggies a family would need, and trying to just break down, what should my CSA provide for them. My CSA, I don't expect it to provide all their fruits and vegetables for the week. So I figure that it roughly ends up providing about 30 to 45% of their fruits and vegetables for the week, depending on the time of year and how the season's going. So kind of what I came to very quickly was that what would be market rate for the vegetables in our area is not affordable for the median income family, and is just right on the edge of affordability for someone making a living wage in our area. So the kind of the base price, if someone is at the median income, that's half of the population makes that amount or less. I figured that at that level, I recommend somewhere between 75% or 25% and 50% discount. So that's me going into this knowing that my goal is having 50% of my members paying less than the value of my share, which was a little bit unnerving starting out, that you're intentionally going in thinking half or more of the people are going to be paying less than you would ask others to pay if you're just at a straight cost for a CSA. So I was a little bit nervous to see how it would turn out. Then Francis, if you want to go to the next slide, it kind of breaks down the last 2 years of member contributions. So on the left, from 23, that's when I didn't have a slide up on the chart or the scale. Just said, if you're able to, please consider contributing and supporting someone else's share. And then on the right slide, that's where I did have a scale that did slide up. And numbers came in fairly similar. The one thing you'll notice is that the 0 to 25% payment, that is primarily, but not entirely, VeggieRx or prescription produce. participants, and I had one of my main people that connected me with patients from the hospital left their position this year, so I had a lot fewer of those prescription produce participants than I have had the last 2 years. So that's kind of the biggest difference. But beside that, the numbers came out fairly similar. Yeah, you could go to the next slide, and that kind of breaks down the income from the different values. So this was the third year that I've had pay what's right for you option. And on the left side, you can see kind of breaks down the income compared to what the value of the produce was. So the first year I lost about 14% of what the income would have been. The second year, very similar, about 13%. And then this year, it was a lot different, almost broke even. It's at 3%, and it doesn't have my fall CSA, winter CSA in yet, but those members tend to slide up more or contribute a little bit extra more often. So it might get close to even breaking even, very close to that, which is wonderful. I'm really excited. On the right side, you can see my member retention. I've always had pretty high member retention before going to sliding scale. And then you can see where it goes from 20 to 21. That's when I switched to a sliding scale. I did lose a huge percentage of people that had been with me for a number of years. I think someone had a question at just kind of when they registered that said, has there been any pushback switching to a sliding scale? And I did have pushback that first year from members who'd been with me a long time. One was the boss of my wife, and a lot of talking behind people's back. So in a small town, that can happen. It's called a communist, which is not a term of endearment in Spearfish, South Dakota. And so it was definitely pushback, but you can see from 21 to 22, when it was sticking with the sliding scale, the retention was very similar. And this last year, numbers went down a little bit, but a bunch of those people ended up starting or expanding their home gardens. So that was wonderful. I was able to give some of them seeds or plant starts. Still have good connections, and some of them are joining the fall or winter CSA, which is great too. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think, for me, I think one of the most important things to think about is just your context, where you're at, your community. That's why I think it's great that we've got a couple other farms who are operating in very different contexts than small rural South Dakota, which is where I'm at. I think it's really important to just meet people where they are in your community, explaining what you're doing and being very, very transparent about it. I try to share all the numbers, all the information with all my members, share information about my expenses, just kind of keep them in the loop. And I think it's easy to switch to a sliding scale or something different if you have relationships with people. If it's your first year to operate a CSA, it might be a little more difficult because you don't necessarily know your members. But if you already have known your members for a year or two, I think if you are able to just build on that relationship and explain to them what you're doing, why you're changing, it works very, very well, pretty smoothly. I mean, minus people who are completely unsupportive of it, jumping ship, which is okay. I still have relationships with those people and make sure to bring them their favorite veggies every year. Shishito peppers for some of them, tomatillos for others. So Yeah, I think I did see one person put in the chat quick what slide up or slide down means. Slide down refers to if someone pays less than the value. So if they go for a example 25 or 50% reduction, and then slide up means paying more than the value. And my share value is at $40. That's what I try to hit on average or above. So that's what the slide up, slide down means. Thanks, Francis.
Thank you so much, Jared. Really appreciate you sharing a little bit about how you've created a structure that's seeming to definitely work for the members in your community. And we have contact information here on the slide as well. So if you have additional questions for those on the call today or who want to just reach out to Jared directly, that's here as well. And then I appreciate you answering that other question because I was going to ask if you could address it about the sliding down and sliding up. So thank you.
Sorry, I just saw there was another question about the prescription produce program. That's completely covered by the members who slide up or support shares in my program. So I don't have any grants or any other outside. So if it doesn't cover it, then I cover it by making a little bit less. Is it? Yeah, so I hope that answered the question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Our next panelist, Abigail Miller from Wonka's Harvest, to tell us a little bit about what scale payment options are looking like for the CSA.
Yeah, hello, I am Abigail. Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, I have a little intro. So yeah, we're in Hollandale, Wisconsin. It's maybe 45 minutes or so outside of Madison. We started in 2020 and we've been doing a sliding scale CSA ever since. So we started with doing that. We are completely no-till. So this is a picture here of our farm. We're on an 80-acre property, but we use about 3.5 acres for production. So you can see our fields there. It's about an acre or an acre and a half. We have 3 greenhouses. We have a little pig pasture. It's about 1.5 acres of production. We are not certified organic, but we have all organic practices. We don't spray. We use all organic seed and compost, and we are women-owned and operated. Go to the next slide. Here's a picture of our crew from this year. So we do have about 10 people at the height of the season. We also use volunteers. So we have volunteer programs for people who want to come every week or every other week, and they can get a CSA box too. So yeah, just a little bit more about us. We grow a big variety of things. Part of being a small, growing in a small space and being no-till is that we have a lot of turnover with our vegetables. So a lot of different types of vegetables throughout the season, a little bit of everything. We do mushrooms on our shoulder seasons. We have a big herb, a big like culinary and medicinal herb garden. We also do pigs and beekeep. And we sell our produce to our CSA. It's about 60 people. We go to the Dane County Farmers Market, and we've done a few smaller farmers markets through the years. Mount Horeb one is the one we've been doing this year, which has been really fun. We also supply some restaurants and some small like co-op grocery stores. Next, thank you. Here's just some pictures of what our CSA tends to look like. So the one all the way to the left is a more recent one with the hot peppers. The one all the way to the right is middle of the summer tomato season, and then the spring one in the middle. Next, please. Thank you. Yeah, so we have a lot of different options for our CSA, and I think this is really helpful for people who want to sign up who maybe wouldn't otherwise. So our sliding scale goes from 50% to 150%. I just made a little graph here that shows 50% to 125% because not many people, if anybody, pay more than 125%. So this is just an example of what the payments can look like. So yeah, we have a bunch of different options, right? We have weekly and bi-weekly, so people can get their shares every single week or every other week. We have 2 different sizes, so we have a full or a bountiful, and we have different payment options, so people can pay every single week, and it's like a subscription, or they can do upfront payment. I think one important thing about that is that if they're doing upfront payment or weekly payment, there's no difference in the pay. So people who are able to afford maybe $500 in spring aren't paying, they're not paying any less than somebody who's doing it weekly. And this summer we did something new. We did segments. So we have about 20 weeks of our CSA, but we actually did 6 segments this summer, which has been really awesome for us. And I think for our customers. So we have like spring, summer, fall is what we're calling it. So people are able to pay for the full season. So this payment like breakout is for the full season. But we had a lot of people who were maybe like on vacation in the middle of the summer, or who we met at the market in the middle of the summer who wanted to just join the fall. So they just signed up for one of the seasons or 2 of the seasons or the segments. Yeah, and I think that made our numbers even better than last year than they would have been otherwise. So I'm just gonna maybe touch on this graph a little bit. It looks kind of confusing, but so for our full or like our smaller size of our CSA, we value it at $28. And then for the bountiful or the bigger one, we value it at $36. So if somebody was paying weekly, that's what they would be paying. If they're paying upfront, it's that times 18 because we have a week off in between the segments, or that times 9 if they're every other week. And 50% is just 50% of it. And then it goes up to 150%. Thank you. So here's just a picture of the full payments for this year, 2023. All 3 years look similar to this, and all 3 segments of this year look pretty similar. We've had between 95 and 105% is like what people are paying. So we're pretty much getting 100% or just about every season and every segment. So it's been really, really successful for us. You can see here that more than half of our customers are paying 100% of the value. So there's a pretty small percent that's actually paying less, and there's a larger chunk that's paying a little bit more. So this full season, we got about 105%, but I think with all of the seasons combined, it came out to like 98% or so was our like total value. We can continue. So I just wanted to touch on a couple things about our members. So when people are checking out and they're getting the CSA online, there is no, they don't have to email, they don't have to do anything special. Every single person goes through the checkout the same and then chooses in the drop box what they want to pay. So between 50% to 150%. And every single person goes through that. And I just think that's important because I know, like an example is a lot of different farms will have something on their CSA page that will say like, there's options. If you're unable to pay, send us an email. We can figure something out kind of deal. And that's really cool. But I think that having people be able to just choose what they want and what they're able to pay is definitely more inclusive. And with that, there's no employees or nobody else knows what percent our members pay. So we might all pack the CSAs together And we just make sure that that's like hidden information, because of course we don't want people to, like, if we're out of peppers or something, nobody's going to be like, oh, we'll give one less pepper to the 50% members or whatever. Everybody gets the same bag no matter what they pay. So another way that we just get customers is the Fair Share CSA list. So Fair Share is a really awesome program in the Madison area. There's a lot of CSA farms on it, so people can look up what they want, or like what kind of farm they're interested in, and see it on the list there. Fair Share also has a program for people who are their members to do a financial assistance. I'm not 100% on that information. I'm sure Sadie could answer questions if there's more on that, but we're just affiliates. So we're not able to do that, but it's really awesome. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it's up to like 50% or something that Fair Share has financial assistance for. Other ways we get our customers is market relations. I shamelessly like hand out flyers and talk about our CSA all the time. So like right now we're getting ready to do our winter storage CSA, and I talk about it to every customer pretty much at our market. And we also do a lot of donations. So this here is a picture of the Madison Community Fridge. We at Wonka's helped set this up, and it's a really cool program. There's a fridge here, there's a pantry, and people will put meals in it. We frequently stock it with our vegetables. We've also donated to farms to families, to elementary schools, and to food pantries. And yeah, I think that's helped us get some more members. Okay, next one. Yeah, so lastly, I just wanted to touch on Madison's demographics, because we do live in a pretty wealthy city, or we're supplying to a pretty wealthy city. And I think that's important to note, because again, like we showed, there's a lot of people who paid more than 100%. And they did that just not based on their income or anything like that. They just chose that they were going to pay it because they were comfortable with it, right? And yeah, so Madison's annual income is pretty high for compared to especially other parts of Wisconsin, and the national income rate. And also, Madison is a really farm-friendly place, especially like for CSA farms. So Fair Share is awesome, but like the market is really great. It's just a really farm-friendly place, which also means there's a large market for it, right? People are interested in it. There's more than 50 CSA farms on the Fair Share CSA list. And I got curious and looked up cities with similar population. We have like 300,000 people, and both Gilbert, Arizona and Reno, Nevada have far less CSA farms available for them. But in case you're curious, I think Buffalo, New York had the most. It was like over 100 or something. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on that, because I think we are in a really good city to be doing a sliding scale CSA, and maybe it's not as easy for people who live in cities that don't have as much money, or CSA farms just aren't as prevalent. Yeah, I think that's the last one. Here's a picture of our cute piggies.
I love that. Thank you so much, Abigail. This is also just a great build on from Jared's earlier comments around, you know, making it work for the context that we're in, and how we're CSAs as a lever for supporting local food systems in our communities. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's wonderful. And our third and final panelist for this afternoon is Brian Allen from Zephyr Organics.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian. I am an attorney in recovery. So in 2010, I started apprenticing at Zenger Farm, and I've been there until 2022. That was my last year. And then I started a farm with my friend David. So I'm going to talk about both my time at Zenger Farm and when I implemented the sliding scale there, and then how it's going for us at Zephyr Organics. I'm also the SNAP. We do a SNAP match program in the Pacific Northwest CSA Coalition. So I manage that program. So at our farm, we're really about community. Everybody picks up at the farm. We do events at the farm at almost every pickup. You know, we do silly things like we bedazzle clothes, or we do a watermelon seed spitting contest. So we really know everybody in the CSA by name, and they know each other. So I just wanted to highlight that. Next slide. And then if you play the video, you can see what our pickup is like. When I was at Zenger Farm, we did a typical CSA pickup, but at our new farm, we do take what you want. And it really is take as much as you want. You know, we ask you to take what it is that you'll be eating and not share with other folks outside of your family, except that if you have guests over, you know, that's obviously you can feed your guests. There's David and his daughter, Anastasia. So it's a little bit unique. People pay per person. And yeah, but when I was at Zenger Farm, it was a typical CSA. Everybody got the same thing and the same amounts. So next slide. So I'm going to tell you what I really think about scholarship funds, which is that I don't like them. You know, when you do a sliding scale, and the way that I implement it is you can either choose to pay more or less. Like, why is it fair that only low-income folks have to constantly talk about how low their income is? Why isn't it the reverse, that wealthy folks have to talk about that? And, you know, take a look at it and consider how much they should be paying. You know, when you have a scholarship fund, you have to have an application, and then somebody has to review it. Like, why do you want to serve as a gatekeeper? That just really puts you in an uncomfortable situation. And when we used to have a scholarship fund at Zenger Farm, we just did like first come, first serve, which is like, why are we even asking you to fill out an application if we're just, and you know, like pouring your heart out as far as why you need this food, when we're just taking the first people who apply. And I really feel like scholarship funds lack in economic solidarity, which is really an important part of CSA farms. And like, everybody deserves good food. It's a human right. So why is it that you have to apply to get a scholarship to do that? And when I was looking at different options, you know, sliding scales are something that is basically used in the medical community, and they were only sliding down. You know, there was a standard price and you slid down. And I was like, well, how are we going to make up the money? And so I got some inspiration from the next slide. Soulfire Farm, you know, which is a black-led farm in upstate New York. And they had these different tiers, and, you know, asked folks of an upper income to pay more. They could also like do a contributor share where you're subsidizing a solidarity share, which was free for immigrants, refugees, and folks, you know, who've been in jail or in prison. So I really liked that you could opt to pay more. So when I implemented it, and I also borrowed some of their language around wealth, and we'll look at that in a second. But yeah, let's take a look at our sliding scale calculator. Next slide. Oh, I got all our figures from the Economic Policy Institute. I basically looked around at all the different living wage calculators that I could find. And most places define a living wage as basically what's the bare minimum you need to make, what's the bare minimum you need to earn in order to cover all of your costs. And that still is actually pretty low. But the Economic Policy Institute's model is more like, what's a minimum, you know, income that you need to like basically live comfortably, meet your needs, and have a little bit extra. So that's what I went with. Next slide. So on the left is where people kind of enter in their information, the number of adults in their family that they'll be feeding, number of kids who pay half price, and then number of babies and toddlers who eat free. And if they're in daycare or childcare, that, you know, affects basically how much money you need. It's an additional budget item. So, and then they input their income. They can do it by week or hour, a month or whatever. And then on the right, the calculator spits this out, which is like, okay, somebody with 3 adults, 2 kids, and a baby needs to make 93,600, or sorry, they need to make 142,000, but you're just making 93,600. So we recommend you pay 70%, and you can pay as little as 50%. I think it slides up to 200%, but you can actually like manually type in more. And then it kind of breaks it out like this is what the standard price is. If you're paying monthly or weekly, like what's your cost? So yeah, I did the same. You can check it out here at that website address. And there's also one at Zenger Farms website, which, doesn't have a different cost if you have a different number of adults or kids. So next slide. And then, after they go through this exercise about what it is they should be paying based on their income, there's also a whole other aspect, which I can't create a calculator for, but it takes into account all of these different things. And you can, I mean, as a CSA farmer, you know that you have folks in your CSA who are AmeriCorps, and, they're technically making below poverty wages, but they also probably have like family wealth. And this is just a snapshot in their life. And they're choosing not to exercise their economic earning power, just like me as an attorney, in recovery. So it really asks you to take into account all these different things. And a lot of this language was borrowed from Soulfire Farm and tweaked. And so people just decide what to pay. I don't ask them for any documentation or reasoning. It's a trust-based community. Everybody knows everybody. And, folks are paying more so that others can pay less. It really is about not just the community supporting the farmer, but the community supporting each other. Next slide. And so what happened when we made this change? Somebody asked who made the calculator. I made the calculator. It's a plugin that you can use it's called Calculated Form Fields, and it's a WordPress plugin. So, when we were using a scholarship fund in 2018 at Zenger Farm, folks had the option of contributing, and they did at the amount of $12.80. This is a CSA with about 200 members. We grossed 125,000 a year back in the day, and 90% of that was CSA income. So some folks contributed, and then we gave out more in scholarships than we received. So about $4,000. And then when we implemented the sliding scale, you can see that people contributed way more, about 5 times as much. And also 2.5 times as many people asked for a discount. So we had a little bit larger of a deficit, $1,200 larger. But I think it's a huge success. Like way more people are contributing, which is what I want to see happening. And then way more people are finding it financially accessible. So next slide. And you can see over the years how it's changed. So in 2019, we had that $4,000 deficit. And then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, right during CSA signup season, we had a deficit of $9,000. That wasn't so hard. Zenger Farm's a nonprofit organization, which I recommend working for a nonprofit farm because you get to experiment with all kinds of different things and face no financial consequences. So we just did a fundraiser to make up that deficit. And then interesting enough, in the second year of the pandemic, we actually came out ahead by about $8,000. So yeah, next slide. This is just kind of shows you like where people are landing. When I was at Zenger Farm, you can either contribute up to 50% more or 50% less. So you get a lot of folks kind of congregating at the 50% less. way more folks congregating at 0%. And just anecdotally, initially I was kind of pissed off when I saw this because it means like a lot of people aren't doing the sliding scale, right? Because if they were, it would be a somewhat even distribution. But then in talking to people, they're like, you know, I should have gotten a discount of 40%, but I just wanted to pay the standard price. You know, I have that flexibility. So it's a lot of people actually who should be sliding down, but are opting to pay the standard price. And that was a pretty consistent distribution, you know, pretty much even, except there was a congregation at the bottom of the scale and at the standard price. Somebody has a question about whether or not they got a they could make a 501c3 tax deduction, and they could if they contributed more than 100%. So then, and this is at my farm now. We only have about 28 families in the CSA, about 50 adults. So it's a pretty small CSA right now. But this shows you like the folks who are sliding up versus sliding down and the actual amounts that they're paying. So anyways, we netted about $1,500 extra by having a sliding scale and at our farm. You know, our farm is at the very western edge of the Portland metro area. We're like the last tiny town before the Coast Range Mountains. And because all the pickup is at the farm, you know, it's a pretty tight radius of as far as where folks are coming from. So we're saturating our market pretty quickly, but the next town over is a little university town. So there's some folks who have a higher income over there. And, you know, these are like the number of shares. So one share is one family, but each family pays a different amount based on the number of people in their family. So that's why these numbers are kind of all over the place. Next slide. Yeah, we make cotton candy too at CSA Pickup, and it looks really pretty in the clouds. So if you have any questions, you can get in touch with me about your questions. There's my email address.
I love that. I love that very much. Thank you so much, Brian, for sharing and for even the framing that you're offering as well. Let me see. Okay. So now taking a little bit of time to open it up for both discussion and Q&A. And so here, please feel free to, you could use the raise hand icon, offer additional questions in the chat. You can also just hop off on mute. Please you could turn your video on, just giving us some space to engage with Jared, Abigail, and Brian here, who've shared some pretty incredible models and ideas and inspiration for the ways that we structure sliding scale or payment options for CSAs. There are a couple of questions that did come through during the registration, so I figure we'll go through those first, and then as there are additional questions that come up, please feel free to offer those in the chat or raise your hand, come off mute, and join us in the discussion. To start off, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stop share at this point. We don't need to have the slide up the entire time, so we can move off of share screen here, and then let me scroll through the chat. So I know, Jared, you answered a little bit about this first question relating to, so the original question as it's written, I'll read it out loud. Have you had pushback or negative feedback on the concept of sliding scale model with your members? What was the feedback and how you addressed it? I know, Jared, you shared a little bit about that, but also just kind of offering this up to Abigail and Brian as well, just overall feedback. Heard a number of things around just how responsive CSA members have been, but wanted to see if you had any other reflections or comments to that in terms of the feedback and reception around the structures that you've created for your members.
Our members love it. When we made the change at Zenger Farm, there was, I remember one email exchange with somebody who, said, your calculator is suggesting that I pay 40% more. I can't afford that. And I said, well, you can decide to pay whatever you want. Like, that's how it works. It's just based on trust. And then they responded, but I'm still confused by their response, but it was basically like, I'm not going to pay 40% more, and so I'm going to go with a different CSA. And that's fine. Like, if you're not in it for the economic solidarity with the rest of your community, go with the standard pricing. There's a bazillion other CSAs and grocery stores where you can go buy food at a standard price. So I don't know. That was my one pushback.
Yeah, at Wonka's Harvest, we started with the sliding scale CSA. So, I mean, we've had good feedback on it, but we haven't had any really negative feedback because, we didn't have any members or anything before changing, like both of the other farms have. So I think people partially just chose us because of that reason. So, but yeah, I agree with Brian. It's great, really making a community with your CSA members, and that's part of it, right? People who want to help and support and yeah, be a part of that community.
And I guess I just touched on the negative responses I had, but there have been many multiples more positive responses, both from people who had been members and chose to slide up, had been members previously and felt a whole bunch of relief being able to slide down and still be able to be a member and not stress their budget. So it's, yeah, overall, very, very positive and much more vocal on the positive than negative side.
I appreciate you all sharing that. Seems like, especially in the instance of change, if there's something new or if it was a new structure, as I was listening to you all share, just the ways that members navigate the change and just working to move through that process. So appreciate you sharing that. The second question here, let's see. So one attendee had asked, and I'll offer this up. I think, Jared, you also might have touched on this a little bit earlier too, but this question comes in, we need to be able to accept SNAP as an aggregator, not a single farm. How do you incorporate that with sliding scales, if at all? And so wondering what you all think, what your thoughts are for all three, whoever wants to start.
Yeah, we accept SNAP both at our new farm and our old farm. And, Oregon has participates in Double Up Food Bucks, the SNAP match program. So those payments are actually facilitated by the CSA coalition in our state. But the way that works with the sliding scale is that folks who pay with SNAP, would just pay 50% because it's a $1-for-$1 match. So in that case, the farmer is getting 100% of the dollars, but the member is just paying 50%. Yeah, and at Zenger Farm, about 40% of our members paid with SNAP, and there's a 50%. The way we structured it was a 50%, or sorry, a $50 payment when you sign up, and then equal monthly payments throughout the season. So,
I was registered to accept SNAP, but so few of the members chose to do that. Even the ones who had SNAP, they preferred to pay with cash and then use their SNAP elsewhere at like the grocery stores. So if someone really needed to or wanted to pay with SNAP after I ended up getting rid of my machine because the fees cost me more than I was making. So if somebody really needed to pay with SNAP and I had already gotten rid of the machine, I just gave them the share for the week. So that's how I dealt with it. But I'm hoping can't remember what it is, the organization that's processing SNAP payments now for farms, but in the process of registering for that. So that could be a good option for other farms out there too.
Yeah, I had mentioned this briefly, but unfortunately we don't accept SNAP or anything. I would love to, but we haven't found an option that really works for us yet. But I did kind of mention like Fair Share CSA Coalition does helps with cost of shares with people who need assistance. And I think that Liv had posted here, it's like 25 to 75% of the cost. And really quickly, I also just saw a question come through that I wanted to touch on that's kind of similar. It's a work for share. We do that at Wonka's Harvest, and we just value it based on, so our bountiful shares are worth about $36. So we have people work for about 3 hours, and then we give them a share. And typically, we also give them a little extra if they want it, if they want to go out and pick whatever it is. So we've had a few people come just once, which has been fine. But we've also had a few people come pretty regularly, which has been really awesome.
It's super awesome to hear, Abigail. To that question around work for share options, Brian, Jared, do you also have that as well? Seeing a need for it? I just see I'm shaking head no.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to run a farm that's like financially feasible on its own, and so we don't rely on volunteer labor, but we do folks come and play and harvest, like they come and do the pumpkin harvest and the potato harvest and stuff like that. But there is no work trade.
All right, and then I think Anna, I saw your
Oh,
hand go up, Anna.
yeah, I was
ahead.
going to go back to, we're an aggregator that takes SNAP and has limited income options in Ohio. So I just wanted to kind of add on to what they were saying. We also use the Double Up Bucks kind of program. It's called Produce Perks in Ohio. And so our SNAP customers, we have a different way of scaling our pricing, but our SNAP customers get half off of retail because it's a dollar for dollar match, just as I think Brian said. But then before we used that, we just gave them a standard limited income rate that we subsidize elsewhere too. So
Awesome. Thank you for that. This time together flew. I did not realize we were already at time. So one, deeply appreciative of the extra couple of minutes of your time here this afternoon, and wanting to share. Thank you all to especially deep appreciation to Jared, Brian, and Abigail for sharing their insights and experience. Slides will be shared in a follow-up email, so you can anticipate those forthcoming, along with resources that will be shared in the Network Resource Library on the CSA Innovation Network website. And the recording for today's conversation will also be posted on the CSA Innovation Network YouTube channel, so be on the lookout for that. There's a closing poll here. If you have a couple minutes or a couple seconds to answer those questions. Deep appreciation for your time again. Thank you all so much, and wishing you a fruitful rest of your week. Take good care.